Always excited to catch up with one of my favorite people in the space, the head man over at Xtreme Couture. 2022 was a very busy year for this man. 2023 will be no different. No downtime in MMA, is there, Eric Nicksick, who has a very busy weekend coming up as well. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, man. I'm actually excited to get back to it. So ready to rock and roll.
There we go. So much to talk to you about, my man. But first, we're into this new year. Like I mentioned earlier, 2022 was a wild one, and it got wild immediately for you in 2022 in January with just regular day-to-day stuff, being a husband and a dad and a coach. And then Francis Ngannou is getting ready to defend the heavyweight title against Cyril Gane. And then there's an injury that comes up a few weeks before the fight. And we're learning more about that on his YouTube channel. And then he wins, and the surgery and all the chaos surrounding him in the UFC and his contract. And that was just the first quarter of 2022, not to mention everything else that happened. So 25 to 30 years from now, Eric, when your grandkids come up to you and they say, Grandpa Eric, tell me about 2022. What are you going to tell them?
There's something to be said about adversity and finding a way to get through it. And again, like we've talked about this quite a bit. I learned a lot from that first couple months of 2022, just a lot about, trusting Francis and trusting the process and, believing in your skill set. And, I think a lot of guys probably should have pulled out of a fight like that, and especially of that magnitude, Francis just felt that he was able to go in there and get the job done on that injury. And he went out there and did it. He believed in his skill set. And, I think if I'm telling my grandkids about it, I'm going to tell them, stick through it and get through that adversity, because on the other side of that, there's some great things that happen.
What is it like kind of going back and reliving that? Because all the videos are coming out, the build to the fight, the injuries, everything. And you're obviously an important piece of this puzzle, because talks about, dude, you probably shouldn't be fighting, and all right, let's do it. But to go back and like relive that all these months later, what has that been like for you?
It definitely brings up some of that anxiety, and when I would go home at night, I would say this, I would try to be, calm and cool around Francis about the whole situation. But it was my wife, the one that's probably was the blunt of a lot of that anxiety, was just me freaking the hell out. Like, what are we doing here? Like, I don't know why he's not going to pull out this fight. But at the end of the day, man, I really, really appreciate the journey that we were on. And, it's going to be hard to relive that story whenever there's a documentary or somebody wants to talk about Francis Ngannou. It's going to be really hard to relive what we went through, not only with the injury, but with the contract stuff and the former team and, with Gane and those guys and Coach Lopez. So it was definitely a storybook ending to be able to go out there and get that victory. And, it's definitely something I'll be sharing that story with my grandkids for sure.
The journey continues. So I might as well just get right into it. Francis Ngannou, how is he doing? How is he feeling? How is his knee right now?
Man, so I talked to him yesterday. He had to go back home and get his visa renewed. So he's back in Cameroon. He went back home for the holidays and he had his appointment to renew his visa. So we actually spoke yesterday. But before he left, man, we sparred on Thursday before he left for Christmas. And I tell you what, Mike, he looked amazing, like absolutely amazing. And I was just so happy and elated to see how his energy felt when he was in the room. And like, you can see like, it's like the old Francis is back, so I'm very optimistic about everything. And again, like the contract stuff, and that's all up to Francis in the UFC. But I know as far as the skill set goes and what I'm seeing in the room, it's very positive right now. And I just can't wait to get him back in and get back to training.
I know, just going back and watching that documentary, Francis being who he is in freaking December, 9 months removed from surgery like that, I'm sure being around him all this time, it's probably not all that surprising that he had that energy and was feeling as good as he did. But like deep down, prior to that, if I told you in October that right before Christmas, Francis is going to be moving around, he's going to have this great energy after this just incredible injury he had, the surgery he went through, the rehab, everything, would you have believed me? Were you surprised at all?
I mean, obviously we're kind of at the mercy of the rehab process. And I just knew we had a moment where we got back in the gym. It was just me and him. There was no one really in the gym at all. And he came in and hit some pads with me. And it was like, we had hit a couple different combinations. And we do this and we do that. And then our energy levels, even both of us, like two little kids in a candy store. And then like, he just like kind of bounced and he's like, I'm back. And I was like, yeah, bro, you're back. Like, he goes, I feel good. I feel good to be back. And he's like, I miss this shit. And that was the thing that, like, for me, that I wanted him to have that feeling, not the love again for the sport, not any of the business stuff of it, the love for the sport, the love for, well, what we've built here at Xtreme Couture and getting better and, you know, building all this new skill sets and everything like that. Like, I want him to come back and feel rejuvenated and ready to get back to work. And that's what I saw from him that first day back. So it just gave me a lot of optimism that he's back, man. He's ready to rock and roll.
That's great. And I know heading into that fight, there was a lot going on with the injury and the business side of him. Was that something that you felt was missing from him? That love for the sport, that it wasn't just a business thing. It wasn't just about, I signed a contract, I have to fight this guy, I get a contract thing with the UFC. The love for the game. Oftentimes, especially fighters of his magnitude, they tend to forget about that with everything else going on. Do you feel like that was missing in a way from him?
No, I don't think that like that for him. I do feel like that could be a distraction or a deterrent, but man, that dude is dialed in, especially practice to practice. He's focused, and the things that, like, I'm able to benefit from by being a coach here for the younger guys, they get to see that process that Francis goes through as a champion. You know, Aljamain Sterling and the guys in the room that are at the championship level, they get to sit back and watch this process, and they understand, you know, okay, this is what it takes to be a champion. And Francis has always exuded that, no matter what was going on with the business or anything like that. His focus has remained the same on being the best athlete that he can be. And I just think that this shows that, you know, it's just championship pedigree.
So from everything that I have heard, others reporting as well, things are trending in the right direction. Like, confidence is in a good place, but as you know, especially with the start of 2023, this crazy world of MMA, you can never be 100% confident in anything. And all eyes, all excitement is towards a fight between Francis Ngannou and Jon Jones. I feel like we've been talking about this fight for 2 years now, Eric, but heavyweight title fight. This is what we love this sport for. And it seemed like March 4th was kind of the timeline that was being circled, and obviously still a lot of hurdles to jump over, obviously. But I know you're not privy to the business stuff, but to your knowledge, where do you think we're at here with this fight?
Yeah, I think it's almost 50-50, to be honest with you. When you're talking business and timeline, you know, I'm confident from what I saw from Francis a couple weeks ago that if we had to be ready for March, I think we can get him ready. But I think it is cutting it a little bit short just because he had to go back home and just renew his visa thing. And then obviously they still haven't announced anything yet with his contract or where they're at. So I mean, I'm 50-50 for me. And I'm hoping, I'm pleasantly, you know, pulling for this thing, fingers crossed that we get this deal done. And if it's not March, maybe it's April or May or something like that. But I do know that they're shooting for March and Jon Jones is the opponent. So other than that, everything else is out of my hands. But if they tell me, hey, we're fighting March 4th, we'll have our guy ready. That's for sure.
If a magic genie just said, here, Eric, here's $500, and you have to use this $500 to bet on whether or not this fight happens in the first half of 2023, what are you betting on?
I'm not allowed to bet. That's a trick question, Mike. You guys are trying to get me.
No, you know what I'm saying. You can't bet on UFC fights. This is just betting that a fight actually happens. Let's throw the rules out the window for one moment.
I'm a Vegas boy, so you know me. If we're at the craps table, I'm always betting for the table to win. I'm not a don't pass line guy, so put that 500 on. Let's make this thing happen. So I'm optimistic that we get this thing done, and I'll put my 500 that it's going to happen.
Fair enough. All right, now betting is illegal again. So let's say the fight is booked and you're going to start preparing for this. Because look, as a coach, being able to prepare for Jon Jones, you can't ask for much more than this. He's the GOAT in a lot of people's eyes. But what's interesting about this matchup in particular, we're approaching 3 years since he's last fought, and that was at 205. And you can argue that he was fighting at a point where maybe he was getting a little unmotivated. Maybe he was just seeking that new challenge. It just wasn't there at 205. How do you attempt to start to break Jon down now with this new frame and new weight class? He's sort of a mystery in terms of what he's actually going to bring to the table with all this time off. Like, how do you begin to break Jon down?
You nailed it. And we were looking at a guy who hasn't fought since February, 2020,
yeah.
Right? And 2020. So you have to assume that in my opinion, you're right. I feel like he's the greatest mixed martial artist to ever do it. That he's working on things behind the scenes, because I know that that's the same thing we did with Francis. And I know we got a lot of criticism early on about like, oh, he won't be able to wrestle with Stipe. He's not an offensive wrestler. But those are the motivational things that we use behind the scenes to work on. We just hadn't been able to show it. The mystery of what Jon is doing is, in my opinion, he has a great coach in Brandon Gibson and Greg Jackson, those guys down there, that they're putting a skill set together and working on new things and nuances to the game that I have to only assume that he's going to come back a better version. What that can be, I'm assuming that, it's probably going to be including in some of the offensive wrestling, things like that. But at the end of the day, man, I feel like we're going to get to see the best Jon Jones version. Hopefully that's been sitting out for 3 years, that he's going to come back bigger and better. So the thing I got to look at as well as a coach, knowing that the weight for him is he's putting on mass. He's putting on weight to kind of move up into this weight class. Whereas Francis carries this weight naturally. This is something that he's been doing his entire life. So I think the one key for me is just how does Jon hold that weight, and how is he able to transfer that weight into a 5-round fight versus a natural heavyweight? So those are things I think that for me, we're going to have to look at and try to take advantage of.
Well, we will see if this fight gets put together, but let's talk about this weekend, because the UFC is back at the Apex, first card of the year. And it's a big one for the team. We got Dan Ige fighting in the co-main event. We got Puna Soriano fighting in the featured bout. We'll get to those guys and the significance of those two fights in a moment, but are those the only two guys, only two fighters on the card, or is there anybody else?
Javid, Basharat.
Oh, yeah, that's right. The Basharat, those guys are, I can't wait to see what the futures for those guys. But I wanted to ask you about Dan and Puna specifically, because you posted something on social media, because Dan's fighting Damon Jackson, Puna's fighting Roman Kopylov. And for those who didn't see the post, and how cool it is that not only are Dan and Puna fighting on the same card, but they're doing so in consecutive fights in the featured and co-main spots. Like, what is that like for you to see, and what do you think it means to them?
I think it's one of the coolest stories in MMA right now, to be honest with you, like positive stories. And it's just something that when you have two childhood friends that grew up together in Hawaii, that went to high school together, that had this vision and had this goal for one another at such a young age, that they used to talk about this on the school bus. Hey man, maybe one day you and I'll be fighting in the UFC together. And each having someone that is next to you with that same vision and same purpose, and is rowing the boat in the same direction. You have those same goals, that one day, maybe when you're tired or you don't feel like you can make it, the other guy's pushing you. And I think that's the relationship that you see, that's so tight bond that they have with those two, is, they went to college together. And then Dan, up on a whim, decided to move out to Vegas, and he wanted to start training here at Xtreme Couture, and was able to convince Puna to do it shortly thereafter. So, seeing these two in the room from the regional scene and growing, and now they're growing of families, Puna's getting married, Dan's married, has a son. Just seeing these guys grow up from, sleeping on couches to now, co-main event and back-to-back in the UFC, fighting from where they've been from Hawaii to today, I think it's a pretty cool story.
Is there like a different kind of giddiness with these two guys during the camp, knowing all of this, or is it just sort of business as usual?
They'll say it's business as usual, but I know, like, Puna's a little giddy dude, bro. He runs around all giddy and like, this is fun, but that's our guy. And then Ige is very businesslike and structured, but then when it comes to like knowing that Puna's on the same card as him, he's been super stoked about the whole situation as well. I mean, it's got to be just a childhood dream come true for both of these guys. So I couldn't be happier for them, and I couldn't tell you, man, how honored I am to be in both of their corners and be able to go out there and watch them compete.
What can you say about Dan Ige? Because this guy just wants to fight. And yes, he enters the fight on 3 straight losses, but I had to go back and look at this again, because I have a Twitter show and people ask me about Dan Ige. And I think, to me, Edson Barboza has the most ridiculous strength of schedule I've ever seen in UFC history. But Dan Ige is right there, because since 2020, Mirsad Bektic, which was a name viewed far differently back in 2020, then Edson, then Calvin Cater, Gavin Tucker, which people forget about. Gavin was on a roll before Dan knocked him out in seconds. Then Zombie, then Emmett, who's about to fight for the interim title, and then freaking Movsar Evloev, and now Damon Jackson, who has a ton of momentum right now. That is an insane run of opponents, man. Is it not?
I agree. And he's just that kid where he'll fight anybody, and anytime, any place. He's got that mentality, and he has a good skill set that I think he can match up with anybody in the featherweight division very well. And he's been a kid that just been hovering right about there. There's things that we've done in fights where, in the Kelvin Gastelum fight, just aesthetics and optics, that we were winning round one, we let round two, slip away, or round one slip away. We were one round two, just things like that. Like, he's not getting blown out of the water per se in any of these fights. And for us now, and having Damon Jackson on a roll, who I think's a great fighter in his own right. Again, we're talking about strength of schedule. Dan, man, he's going to go in there and fight anybody that you put in front of him. And I think that's what the fans love about him so much.
How would you describe Dan's mindset heading into this? I know he has the business-like mentality, but is he feeling any extra pressure here in your eyes, or no?
Honestly, Mike, I really feel like he's given into the fact of just allowing himself to go in and be the athlete. I think in the Zombie fight, that was the fight that I saw him put so much more on himself because of the baby. They just had Bam. So I knew that it was like he wanted to get that win more than anything in the world. And I think that was well documented after the fight too. Yeah. I think UFC was following us around. He put a lot of added pressure on himself in that fight. I thought he fought great against Josh Emmett. Josh, I think, did enough to get the decision. And then Movsar, man, I mean, this guy's an up-and-coming talented stud in his own right. But for Dan, I want him just to understand that he belongs. This is where he's at in the UFC, and he knows that he can go out there and just kind of perform the way that we all see him in the room, and just go out and do his thing. And he's going to go out and execute and do well on Saturday. We don't need to add any more extra pressure to him. Just go out there and do his thing, and I think he's going to do just fine.
The roster at the gym is just ridiculous right now, because we mentioned Francis and Dan and Puna, and you got Chris Curtis, who, I mean, can I just, before we get to the other names, the defensive savvy of Chris Curtis just does not get enough love. I mean, I'm sitting there watching the fight. We're about to go live on the watch along, and he's fighting Joaquin Buckley, and everybody on Twitter is like, oh, Joaquin's just piecing this dude up. And I'm sitting there watching. I'm like, this is Chris Curtis. Like, it's like him and Thiago Moises, I think, are so good at using defense with the stand-up so effectively. And it was just, he just waited for his moment. And the first chance he got, he went in there and just knocked Joaquin Buckley out. His defense is incredible, man. Like, what is that like to watch right there, watching him do his thing like that? Because that was just so ridiculous.
It's insane, Mike. And he does it day in and day out in the room. It's so frustrating for a lot of the guys in the room, because they're just like, man, they just can't find him. I think Sean Strickland and Brad, those guys, and Chris, they have such a good dynamic with pushing one another in the room. But it was funny that you say that. So going into the corner, going into round two, I told Chris, I was like, hey, we need more optics. Like, I know these judges aren't seeing what you and I are seeing at the highest capacity of what your defense looks like. And these guys are going to score that round for Joaquin. And he's like, you think? I was like, no, I know. We need to get more optics, and we need to get moving a little bit more. We can't just let this fight be dictated on what you think is your defense, because I'm telling you, these judges don't know what they're looking at. So we had a code, and it was London. And if you heard me yell London, I go, I need your ass to go, because of what happened with Jack Hermanson fight. So if you hear in the corner, I'm going, all right, bro, let's go London. Let's go find something. It was shortly thereafter that he caught that kick and countered back, and he was able to get that knockout. So I think sometimes his style can be as a demise, because of, a lot of people don't know what they're looking at or what they're seeing, but a trained eye, we see what he's doing up there. And, when he's in motion, when his shoulders are moving, his feet are moving, and he's in motion, that's where he's able to counter so well off of. So when you see Chris moving like the way he is, he's ready to go. And man, he's a joy to watch and a pleasure to coach.
Yeah, he looked sensational. We'll definitely touch on the judging in a moment as well. But, we just saw Sean have a very closely contested fight with Jared Cannonier. You mentioned Brad's got a big fight coming up next week. And then we have Casey O'Neill. We got Manel Kopp, who's spending a lot of time there, who I've been very high on for a long time. Amir Albazi is climbing the ranks at 125. You mentioned Javid. You get the whole Basharat clan there. So of these like up and comers, and I know for you, it's hard to like single anybody out, but who do you think can and will make the most impact this year? Like it's probably all of them in some respect about the moves they're going to make from where they are now to where they're at the end of the year. But who do you think can make the most impact right now?
Yeah, I think it's hard to really pick one. I'll tell you one that's really jumping out to me just because of, I would say, like, not to say disrespect, but what I'm seeing in the room and his motivation has been Cody Stamann. I mean, man, this guy, watching his sparring rounds the last few weeks, and obviously leaves for Brazil on Saturday as well. He's looked unbelievable in what he's doing in the room and the way he's been sparring with guys. So I'm looking forward to seeing Cody's fight as well. And again, Javid, again, you brought him up, fighting again this weekend. And quick turnarounds for these guys. Casey O'Neill making that walk back on March 18th. And then Tatiana Suarez, man. Tatiana's been in the room doing some great work in here. So looking forward to seeing her get back in. She is a grinder. Man, that girl's tough. She's in here like, I filmed something one day because, after each round I make guys do some sort of cardio or everything in between rounds. And Tatiana Suarez is grinding in here. She wants to make sure that she's the hardest worker in the room. So looking forward to seeing her get back to the cage as well.
Do we have an update on Miesha Tate? Do you think she'll fight in 2023?
That's a good question. I see her in the gym all the time. She was nursing a little bit of an ankle injury and then went out, and I thought she did great in her grappling match, especially for the caliber of grappler she was going against. So, but we haven't really talked about her fighting, mainly because Johnny was fighting for ONE FC coming up here soon. So I know her focus was kind of going to Johnny, but I would assume that we would probably sit down and talk and see if that's something she wants to do coming 2023. Knowing her, Mike, she's a competitor, and I know her being out not competing is going to take a toll on her. So I'll probably hear something from her pretty soon.
So let's go back to the judging conversation, Eric, because man, oh man, we saw Raf. It's been a conversation throughout. We've talked about refereeing, but now let's get with the judging conversation, because Douglas Crosby, who we all know who he is at this point, he is scoring the Rafion Stotts Danny Sabatello fight, and you have worked with Rafion getting ready for that fight. And I thought it was a very close fight. I scored at 48-47 for Stotts. First watch, if you wanted to give 48-47 to Sabatello, like, it's not completely egregious, but I still think Rafion did the damage to win a couple of those rounds that might have been 50-50. But 50-45 Danny Sabatello is redonkulous. It's the worst scorecard I've ever seen. And then he goes to Vegas, and we have the Paddy Pimblett Jared Gordon fight. And I don't like to throw the R word out that often, but I think by not scoring the first round for Jared Gordon, it makes this a robbery. Like, if you want to make a case that it's 29-28 Paddy, okay, I'll listen to you. But to give Paddy the first round makes literally no sense to me. And Doug Crosby is responsible for both of those. And these are just two of the many, 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 many examples of judging that is just questionable, is probably the kindest way I can put it. So we're entering 2023. The UFC's back on Saturday. How would you sort of gauge MMA judging right now?
Well, I think for me, let's circle back to, like, because you brought up the Sean Strickland thing. I feel like there needs to be more optics when Sean was fighting Cannonier. I thought it was such a close fight that what I meant by Sean, like, hey, I wanted more kicks, more wrestling, more this, more that. Yes, that would have helped him along the lines and possibly winning the fight. But what I was alluding to more is because I think judges want to see, like, shiny, cool things happening within the round, even if the kicks are being blocked. But it's like the movement and the way that the kicks land and the sound and the effects. I just feel like they're not trained to see what we're seeing at the highest level. So how do you kind of dummy it up a little bit for them? That's kind of what I've been seeing the last few fight cards, to be honest with you. And that's the way we've been trying to coach things. Now, how do we get guys better? That's the main thing. Like, how do we get through some of this stuff, and how do we get them better? Well, obviously the get them in the gyms, do those things where they can get some more reps in, things like that. But you and I talked about this in the past. Make them available for media. Make them available for media after the fights. And it does two things, Mike. Here's number one. They might see things or score things or look at things and bring up that to the attention of us. And we go, oh, okay, well, I didn't look at it from that perspective. Maybe they enlighten us with something. But on the flip side of that, they might also show their incompetence. They might say something that's so egregious that they go, man, the athletic commission can't protect them from what they're saying. Or it might be so off the wall that they're going, well, why are we licensing this guy? You know, and I think that that's some clarity when it comes to MMA judging of what they're actually looking at. Now, when you go to Doug Crosby's situation, we have to give Doug some credit in the regard of, not credit, but a reprieve in the regard that two other judges saw it for for Paddy Pimblett as well, right? I think Doug's getting harped on because he had two back-to-back. And then not only that, the travel in between. You know, I was out there with Raytheon, and you said the best. If it was 3-2 for Sabatello, you're not going to argue that. It was a close fight, right? But to have it 50-45 for Sabatello, that's a problem. That's an issue. Now, when you look at the gold standard of what he looked at, Doug Crosby, he weighed on control for Sabatello. But then he goes over and just dismisses the control of what Jared Gordon did. You know, so it's you can't make an argument for why you scored it for Sabatello and not stay consistent in your judging for Jared Gordon. It just doesn't make sense to me across the board. So which is it? And the answer to that is I don't think they know, Mike.
So a lot of people are saying, and I know my colleague Ari Helwani says it all the time, we need open scoring. We need open scoring. And do I think open scoring would hurt? No. Do I think it fixes this problem? God, no. In fact, I think as negative as the MMA community is now about judging, we will be 10 times more negative because now we get to react to these things round by round. We get to see how incompetent they are each round. So I don't think that's necessarily the fix here. I think it doesn't hurt. It just sees the incompetence more, but I just think it's going to make us angrier as fans. And I don't want that. So what I've been suggesting for a long time is, and I know you need some to build some cool things, but if we want shiny new toys, how about like just a private box? Like we build like 3 little boxes around the cage. Judge has to go in there. They can have a monitor, but they got to wear noise canceling headphones and they just watch the monitor, no commentary. And they get to judge it that way. That way, because I think a lot of why they leaned towards Paddy was because of the crowd. They went crazy. Anytime Paddy threw a punch, they all reacted. And even if he didn't land it. And I think they were clearly nudged in the direction of Paddy because of the crowd. But if you take that out of the situation and we just watch the fight from all angles, just in a box, then we could deal with it a little bit differently. I don't know what the fix is. Like, I don't. Because even if you bring fighters in, I know that's a big argument. Bring in old fighters. There's a potential conflict of interest there.
100%.
So I don't know what the fix is outside of that.
Yeah, and you're right. But let's try something, or let's do something to move forward and give some things that we can do to try to make this better. But I'm with you 100% on the crowd has an effect on that. So let's go back to the COVID days when we were getting ready for Jacksonville. Like the first fight card back, I sat down with our coaches and I said, look, we have to corner fights now a different way because the judges are going to be able to hear everything that we're saying, not only the judges, but our opponents. So we're going to start sparring in quiet rooms. So what we started to try to do was, okay, you had your head coach and he should be doing instructions, but your 2 and 3 should almost be politicking to judges and talking in a way to try to sway your judges. Now, I'm going to give this as an example because this is certainly how I felt. In the RDA Paul Felder fight, Duke Rufus was the head coach for Paul. I was the second. And my job, really, I just try to talk to the judge sitting next to me, and that judge was Chris Lee. And again, he was the one that, for some reason, why I thought Paul Felder won that fight. And Paul will tell you, he didn't win that goddamn fight. But again, that just goes to show you that we have an influence on our verbiage, our, what we're saying. And they hear that. They're sitting right next to us in a quiet room in the Apex. Now, the crowd in the T-Mobile, that's going to take effect too when it comes to the fan favorite, the crowd favorite in that regard, where something that might not have landed gets the crowd roaring. And a guy like Doug Crosby can go, oh, that scored, which when it really didn't. So you're right. I think something along those lines of isolating them or putting them somewhere where there's no crowd or noise canceling or something where to the effect of maybe you don't even know who's the one judging. I don't know. But at the end of the day, I think something's better than nothing. And that's kind of where we're at right now.
You were on a call with Crosby, weren't you?
Oh yeah.
What was that like? Was that just kind of like the commission review of everything? And you were there to like take part? Like, what was that all about? How did that come together?
It's such an interesting setup. So Jeff Mullen, credit to these guys, and Mark Smith, they put together a Zoom meeting with some of the coaches in MMA and then damn near every judge I've ever seen in my life and some of the referees. And it was a great concept and great setup. And what they wanted to do was just almost open it up for us to be able to ask some questions, for judges to ask some questions on their end or answer our questions that we had. And I felt like it was going very well. John Wood brought up a question about like what credentials must a judge have, or if any, like how does it work to become a judge, which I thought was a pretty good question. Say Saud asked a question. I brought up a question. And for some reason why within the questions that were being answered respectfully, no one was like trying to be rude or demeaning. Doug Crosby took offense to some of those questions that were being asked. It got to the point where Jeff Mullen was like, hold on, we're going to put you on mute. Let's get back to where we're at. And here's what everybody is here to, because we want to become better. That's all. So then we watched, I think 5 fights, and every one of us scored those rounds of each of these 5 different fights, right? So we're going to watch this fight, round 1. How do you score it? And everybody scored the round, and everybody scored it exactly the same. The only one discrepancy was, I think Say Saud scored one fight at 10-9 and everybody else scored it at 10-8, but he still had the fight right. Like there was nothing that was crazy or egregious. But during the rest of that interview or that Zoom meeting, you could tell Doug Crosby just really didn't want to be there. You could tell he was kind of the one outlier that was just like, I don't really need to be here because I'm not getting the information out that I want to say, So then after the meeting, he contacted Randy and said, hey, I want to come by Xtreme Couture and I want to talk to Eric and the fighters at Xtreme Couture. And I said to Randy, I was like, hey, it's your gym. You do whatever you want. But he had a platform to do that with the athletic commission. Why is he wanting to come on his own to come talk to my fighters and my coaches here at the gym? That didn't make any sense to me. So it's like, you're going to say your version of what your idea of judging is when your superiors right here are the ones that are overseeing this whole thing. So to me, it didn't feel right being able to bring him into our gym outside of the scope of practice of what the Nevada State Athletic Commission was doing. So I didn't say anything. I was like, man, that's up to you if you want to bring him in or not, but I'm not going to sit around and listen to it. So when he showed up to the gym, I took off. I was like, yo, if you want to talk to these guys, you can, but I'm out. And then I got a call from the athletic commission asking me if Doug Crosby was in our gym. I was like, yeah, he came by, but I don't know what was said and I don't know what happened. So I just took off. So that's where I left it. But, credit to the athletic commission. They were trying their best to mend some fences, if you will, or just educate the coaches that were, involved mostly in the sport. And I thought what they were doing was the right thing to do, but you could just definitely tell that, Doug was kind of an outlier in the interview or the meeting.
That's wild, man. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. And I appreciate your time as always, Eric. Here's to a bountiful and positive 2023 for you and the team, because Lord knows we need it in this space right now. Best of luck to the team on Saturday. And I'm sure we'll be talking throughout, my man. I appreciate the time as always.
It's my pleasure, Mike. It's always great to talk to you, brother. Take care.